Hello, Professor Dr. Alexander Djerovic from Birmingham School of Acting, Birmingham City University, and I will present in this video recorded conference my report in the form of discussion, reflection, combined with interviews and clips from a practical workshop, which are dealing with week-long first intervention in a joint project between Tambov University and Birmingham City University using acting students from Tambov. This first intervention was part of Erasmus Plus funded project, and it took place in October 2016, where we were exploring contemporary British traditions of acting training and approach to staging of Shakespeare. And we were exploring this with acting students who had a very strong background and experience in Stanislavskian training. Erasmus frame for this project will span over a period of 2 years. So it will involve this academic year, 2016-17, and next academic year, 2017 and 18. The initial frame for this is based on the reciprocity, in which there will be 2 visits and 2 participation training intervention from Birmingham School of Acting, working with acting students in Tambov. And then it's expected that 2 interventions will happen in Birmingham, where staff member from Tambov University will come and work with our students and expose them to Tambov acting pedagogy and training, which is very much rooted in Stanislavskian tradition and Stanislavskian thinking about theater. We will be exploring jointly methodology of actors training, which is actually for contemporary circumstances. So from our experience in terms of British tradition and the case study was Shakespeare, staging Shakespeare, it's important to see how that tradition encounters with Stanislavskian tradition, as it is preserved and kept within the Russian cultural and theatrical context, and likewise to see how that tradition can affect our students and what our students can bring while working within that methodology. So it's in both ways an exploration of pedagogy, of actors training, but also it's a way of how you contemporize and how do you approach certain traditions from a present day perspectives, and how you make them relevant. So this paper will reflect on the first phase of a joint research project between the Theatre Conservatoire program in Tambov State University and Birmingham City University. The joint research partnership, as I said, was funded under Erasmus Plus Mobility for international collaboration, and the whole project will be finalized in 2018 with joint papers and possibly even an edited book reflecting on contemporary approaches to Stanislavskian training, looking both at British and Russian traditions. So to start with, we need to understand the basic principles of Stanislavski's method. The method is a dramatic technique in which actors identify closely with their characters, and they share the experiences of that characters with themselves on a very personal level. Uh, in many ways, Stanislavski was one of the key theater practitioners who set up the actress training from the earliest part of 20th century, pretty much up to today and into the future. Stanislavski is the basis. However, there are many modifications of his method, and different cultural specificities enter into play. How Stanislavski is appropriated and understood. The main thing to remember is that his approach to actors is about actor inhabiting the role that they're playing. So it's actor who gives a life, its own life, to the role that they're playing. In many ways, Stanislavski is then understood within the frame of naturalistic theater. There's ways how Stanislavski is interpreted in the West, and there's a whole discourse of research dedicated to that. In Birmingham School of Acting, there is a very strong tradition of working with Stanislavski, particularly with Stanislavski's influences in the West. Stanislavski was not interested in developing a new style of acting. He was actually more about changing and developing way of how to perform, how to help actors achieve certain success in what they're doing, regardless of their acting style. So in a way, Stanislavski goes far beyond the conventions of naturalism. It is a way of training and also a way of developing role and situations and dramatic actions, which are in some sense going beyond realism. It's this kind of a foundation upon which you could build different styles. Where this workshop, the first workshop, the first intervention, was based was on taking certain concepts developed at Birmingham School of Acting in terms of how we approach interpretation and training actors for doing classics such as Shakespeare, and applying them to certain elements and methods that come out of Stanislavski. But Stanislavski's system proposed a series of physical actions which are triggered in order to evoke emotions within actors' performance. These physical actions were then used to sort of develop scenes, develop situations, and through conscious or unconscious ways, through those physicalities, actors were tapping into emotions, which then they would be arose, and they would bring out those emotions through the physical actions. They would be brought out. So the link between the material, dramatic situations, and actors' response to them, so that they can be real for actors, that they can relate to their experience, is very closely connected. If the situation, dramatic material, is removed from actors' experience, it's very difficult for them to relate, and therefore to embody, to be part, to become that role. Stanislavski spent quite a long time working originally through analysis of text, through units, through objectives, through different motivations, super objectives. However, the later stage, which actually very consequential for development of a tradition that we are exploring in Birmingham School of Acting, at the later stage, he started working through performance analysis, and where actually rehearsal were immediately after discussing the main idea. Rehearsals were almost part of the actor's action on stage. So this is important for understanding the collective interplay that takes place. So there are two factors here. First one, that the material needs to be related to the actor's experience, and the second, that it's question about immediacy in terms of actor's action on stage and psychophysical behavior. So the underpinning experience for the actors was to choose relevant scenes, relevant material from Shakespeare plays, and work through them by using some of the traditions explored in Birmingham School of Acting, which are drawn from Royal Shakespeare Company and contemporary actors training and approaches to Shakespeare, and to use that approach with students trained in Stanislavskian technique, and see how this way of working will result in some possible new way of interpreting or new way of understanding of the material. So some of the key questions examined through the rehearsal that we set up for the first phase was, can these plays, the plays that we chosen as a case studies from Shakespeare, be subjected to cultural interpretation by Russian students in the same way as if they're British students? So could you work in the same way, or do you need to readapt based on the students' experiences? Another important question was to look at the different training that comes, which is in one case based on collaborative creation method, which I'm also practicing as a pedagogue and as a director, but it's also very much part of both individual and collective approach to training in the Birmingham School of Acting, and how these two ways of Stanislavskian psychophysical behavior training and the collaborative collective approach, how can they coexist and work together? And even more important was the question of contemporary experience and contemporizing Shakespeare in relationship to Russian students. In a sense, how do you understand those circumstances, but also how do you understand poetic images once these images are translated within a different cultural context? Viewing that the scenes that we're working on need to be experienced as a own local sort of experience. So it's not something that it's not like actors are staging and working on Shakespeare as a material coming from another culture. Rather, Shakespeare is coming from your own culture. It's part of your own experience. So how is it contemporized? How is it brought into their own personal, subjective world? And so those were the key kind of research questions, the starting questions for the first phase. The selection of scenes case studies came from the Comedy of Errors, King John, 12 Nights, Romeo and Juliet, and Othello. And one of the important point, obviously, was to find a translation which would relate to modern Russian language and standard translations that will be in use in theaters. And also, it was important to do a proper casting, considering that the groups that I was working with, consisted of students from first and fourth year. So there was a balance of experiences and inexperiences. The groups were divided to 3 to 4 students, and in most cases, the more senior advanced students were put together with more junior students. So we worked very closely with the acting tutor from Tambov. So the idea was that together we tried to came up with explanation with the students relevant so that they can use that explanation to build the scenes. The first thing was to create groups, and after an explanation of some of the key points in the contemporary approach to Shakespeare, such as working with images, contemporizing experiences and language in order to understand undercurrents, looking at the political aspects of the theatre plays, and understanding the popular culture and the popular elements of the play, and at the same time bringing the plays into the realm of sort of a very theatrical, alive experience, playful experience. We move with different groups and different chosen texts to improvise material based on the everyday circumstances. So the situation were readapted in such a way that the students were bringing their own experiences and their own circumstances, and looking for the ways how to create similar situations that are in original Shakespeare text, which would reflect their own positions. We had 3 or 4 intensive days of workshops organized about different situations, which, as I said, were developed by the students, and each case was different because their experiences were different. I think at this point would be important to see some of the clips which shows the final work of the students and the way how they approached that work. So in addition to these discussions and the examples of students' work, it's relevant to look at some of the explanations coming from colleagues who work in Birmingham School of Acting about their approach to acting and their approach to Shakespeare, but also to graduates who finish Birmingham School of Acting, what they have to say about the training. So this would, as examples, as an evidence, conclude this part of research or report about this part of research where we're looking at 2 different sides, where we brought our experiences and developed them on a certain level around collaborative improvised work coming from Shakespeare scenes.
Hello, my name is Stephen Sims. I'm the head of the School of Acting at Birmingham School of Acting, Birmingham Conservatoire here in England. We're an acting school, and our philosophy is really about bringing out the best in every individual. So each person that we teach is essentially on their own course. The course is bespoke to them. So for example, if we're casting a play, we won't choose a play because we think it's a nice play to do. We will have a group of students, say maybe there are 8 students, and we will find pieces specifically for those students to encourage them, to develop them, to give them a challenge, or to allow them to play to their strengths. And each student, say in their final year, will experience that 3 times. And it's not just about, as I say, them auditioning or doing a play. It's actually about the repertoire is created specifically around a group of students to develop those students. So you really are, the basic underlying philosophy is learning through performance and development through performances. That's all underpinned, obviously, by years of skills training.
Okay, and how do you approach Shakespeare, working on Shakespeare, in terms of like the, as you mentioned, British tradition of work with
Shakespeare? There's obviously a very strong tradition of performing Shakespeare in England, and it is traditionally a text-led. It's a text-led approach. So our approach with Shakespeare is essentially not just about trying to work out what it means, because it's an archaic 400-year-old language and it's also poetic. The approach is to investigate that poetry, to find not just what the sense is, but what also is the underlying poetic, non-rational feeling that poetry is trying to express. And it's by tapping into that you get the full experience of the language. So rather than being led by anything else, the most important thing in a British traditional approach, in the approach of the British tradition, is a respect for the text, but also an understanding of the non-naturalistic sides to a text that you're trying to express.
Thank you. Perfect. Wow. Excellent. Great.
Hello, I'm Freya Sharp, and I'm a graduate from Birmingham School of Acting. I graduated a year ago. And the course has given me the tools to go out into the real world and to be an actor. And a lot of work that I've done has been my own work, or working with friends. And while I was at BSA, a lot of things that I did were to do with Shakespeare. I really feel like I connect to Shakespeare, and I really enjoy playing with Shakespeare and messing around with it, and trying to keep improving it and have new audiences relate to it. I've done another Macbeth project last year, and that was very Tarantino-esque, and it really showed a different side of the story. And definitely related to young audiences. I was also part of the Wanamaker Festival last year, where I got to perform on the Globe stage, and that was with the Jacobean play, and that was a really great experience. And now working on this project, I'm able to use everything that I've learned from school to help put my ideas forward and help it move forward and see what comes out of it.
Hi, okay, my name's Gareth Summers. I teach at BSA. I studied Stanislavski training in Britain, in America, and in Russia for a short time. I was in the Czech Republic and taught at YAMU for a small amount of time there as well. And I've worked from a British perspective, from an American perspective, and I've been interested in the post-communist approaches to Stanislavski and the developments out of active analysis and the work with Demidov and many of the archival assessments of Michael Chekhov from the various centres in which internationally he worked. Also, I'm interested in new approaches to acting that are developed in the 21st century internationally. So some of those stem from work and personal research on intercultural work, in the work of Grotowski, in the Polish tradition, in an approach to mindfulness, British approaches to clowning and play and hidden games that initiate manners of working with action, and also to look at the Stanislavski system from the perspective now of incremental developments in each element of the system. So that includes the work by Cheek by Jowl, current work in mindfulness, work that comes from esoteric traditions, and how each one of those traditions might inform, rather than surpass, but inform current thinking about Stanislavski, specific terminology changes and approaches.
Next phase of this project will be about working more in depth on text with British students and bringing some of the traditions of textual and psychophysical action work from Stanislavski. And then likewise coming back for the third intervention, which would then deepen our own understanding and also our own learning about Stanislavski and about how Stanislavski is being used. And then obviously that will follow by the fourth intervention. So there are like four different steps, of which this one is the first one. Thank you very much, and hope that you have benefited from my presentation and from this recording. Thank you.